All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And as others join us, they can participate as well. Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Danielson Burke, and I'm the Director of Programs for the Theta Tau Central Office. I'm really glad you could join us tonight, and I thank you for your time. A few minor housekeeping items before we get started. Please be aware that this call is being recorded, and it will be available on YouTube in the morning for members to watch that weren't able to join us, or ideally for chapters to use in the future. If you have questions that you would like to have answered, please feel free to drop them in the chat during the program, and we'll do a formal Q&A at the end where we'll ask you to use the hand raise function. So tonight we're going to be talking about how to plan dynamic events, aka don't plan boring things that your members don't want to come to. And tonight we have gathered 3 members to help us with some of that information. Joining us tonight are Paige Waters, Lindsey Carr, and Vincent Chao. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves, the roles they play in Theta Tau, and the experience that they'll be lending with us tonight. Paige, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Paige Waters. I am a current student at Clemson University from Lambda Gamma chapter, and next week I'll be graduating undergrad in civil engineering and starting my master's degree in the spring, and I'm the current SAC Chair for Theta Tau.
I am Lindsey Carr. I'm currently Grand Marshal. I graduated from Kappa Gamma chapter, Virginia Commonwealth University, with a degree in electrical engineering back in 2015. I've been volunteering since 2016. I've been regional director, council delegate, and now obviously Grand Marshal. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Vincent Chao. I graduated in 2017 with a chemistry degree at the University of California, Irvine. I am a member of the Sigma Delta chapter and affiliate member of the Pi Delta chapter, and I'm the current co-Southwest regional director.
Thank you. So some of the questions that we have come from individual students, and some as well come from the brains of our panelists and myself. So as I said earlier, if there are questions you would like answered, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll make sure we cover them before the end of the program. But to start off, Lindsey, can you tell us what makes a dynamic event?
So dynamic events are, at least to me, right, ones that are not boring. They're ones that can adjust on the fly, right? And so finding the person that's responsible for this part of the event kind of helps with that. But it's finding the things that everyone can kind of engage in, and not just presenting.
Vincent and Paige, other thoughts?
I kind of agree with Lindsey on that. Anything that kind of keeps people engaged during the event is always good. So like if you're having like say like one of the more boring things that you kind of have to do, so you have like a presentation, a way to kind of keep people involved would be to get them like kind of maybe ask them questions instead of just presenting the presentations that you're having. So like kind of involve the audience kind of thing. That's always a good way to keep people from like falling asleep also, or kind of like just like if you kind of notice something's starting to go downhill, you can also like kind of find a way to wake people up at the same time. So yeah.
To add to that, I think having a lot of like audience interaction, attendee interaction is just as important as it is for the hosts putting on the event. So I think engaging students and engaging attendees makes an event less boring and honestly more interactive, and everybody leaving the event can have greater takeaways if they really contribute something during the event.
Thank you. Vincent, in your role as regional director, you've planned some events yourself. So what are some of the challenges that you see chapters facing when it comes to planning fun events? Is it organization? Is it planning time? Is it hearing what other chapter members need?
So that it differs by chapter. There's a good chunk of it where the biggest issue ends up being that the event's been just so overdone over the years that people, especially like the fourth years, like they're about to graduate, they've seen the event over and over again. So obviously it's easy to repeat the same events year in, year out, because there's already a framework for how to get those set up. The hard part is getting something new and engaging out there for the people who are towards their tail end of university. So yeah, the biggest challenge is definitely just finding something that's new, innovative, that the chapter can try out. Yeah, I would say it takes more than a semester in that case to kind of get that get that ball rolling, just because it requires like new plannings, like, oh, what do you need for it? Resources, allocation, all those things. So it would definitely have to be something that's planned well in advance, like at least a semester before.
Kind of adding to that too, going with the doing the same thing over and over and over again. Everyone gets bored of that, right? And you can do the same thing, right? But find something to change about it, right? Keep the fundamentals the same, but change one thing, right? To keep it more engaging. But also something I found with chapters is making a lot of chapters put all the planning for an event on one person. And so then it's the same person planning it every semester because they know how to do it, but then they're doing the same thing. So you have to keep it diversified, or at least have a group of people planning something. That way you have different ideas being incorporated.
And Paige, do you have anything to add from your perspective as a student?
I definitely agree with what Vincent and Lindsay just said. This is like my 5th year in my chapter, and so I do understand semester after semester seeing the same events with no new twists to things. And it is really easy for people to be like, oh, we've done that before, let's just do it again. But after the 6th or 7th time, it's like, I don't even want to go because I've already been there, done that. And so one thing that is important is prioritizing quality over quantity. Sometimes we just try to crank out of events because we don't have anything on the calendar, but maybe having 3 or 4 really big, well-attended events with true purpose is going to be a lot better than a bunch of smaller, like thrown together events that we've seen semester and semester before. And like Lindsay said, putting event planning on one person is way too much, especially when they have maybe a narrow idea and they could draw from the ideas of other people in the chapter to plan events that would make it more successful and probably more well attended as well.
Yeah, I actually have one more thing to add on that. It's something I've seen recently from a chapter. So like if you're going like same event year in, year out, like obviously you already have that framework, but by doing that and having the same people take over that, the quality over time can potentially go down in the event, just because it's something that the chapter is already familiar with, so they're like getting too comfortable planning. So that's another like side effect of having events that just like are always used. It's not a bad thing, of course, but it's just something to be aware of.
And I have something to add to that. Something I found a lot of chapters kind of struggle with, or it's just not something thought of, is everything you do, every event you do, if it's the same thing that you've done before, everything should be audited. And I realize it's kind of a big word, right? Or like loaded, but it's just reviewing that event with a group of people every time you do it, or every year, whatever. We say it a lot with new member education as well, specifically of why do you do this event? Is there a reason for the event? What is the purpose of it? And what is the benefit? And so that should also apply to all other events as well.
Paige, you made a good point with the quality versus quantity of event arguments. What are some mistakes that you see chapters making in that regard, versus quality and quantity of events?
So I think, at least for the chapters that I've interacted with, and from what I understand, have a similar like layout of roles in terms of like committee heads and chairs planning events. It's so easy to just want to put something on the calendar and just want your committee to have a service event or have a PD event, whatever it may be, and just plan something rather than assessing the chapter's needs. Because sometimes, especially if you have an older chapter, maybe something like a resume workshop isn't going to be quite as valuable for older brothers as compared to maybe like mock interviews, especially if a lot of them are graduating soon, or talking about grad school and having a panel for that, if that's something they're considering. So I think really evaluating your audience in a way, your chapter, to figure out what they need, so that you're not just cranking out one event after the next because you need something. Nobody said that chapters need to like meet a quota at all. So I think evaluating how to best serve the chapter, especially chapters with limited resources, because you really want something that members are going to benefit from. And so having really good events tailored towards your chapter is probably going to be best.
Thank you. Lindsay, we know that sometimes chapters struggle with unique ideas, with fun ideas. What are some resources that chapters can use or that are available to them that they should consider when planning events?
The university for one, but also reach out to other chapters, your regional directors. Regional directors should be your go-to for pretty much anything, any sort of questions you have. I know a lot of them have a lot of really great ideas, and a lot of those stem from when they were students, they wanted to do this thing but couldn't. And so a lot of good ideas come from that. But then they also know the other members, other alumni or whoever, that have those kinds of great ideas too. But in addition to that, in addition to the regional directors, your university, if you're struggling coming up with kind of new ideas, or just need some kind of outside perspective, university, your faculty advisor, or any of your professors even could have some ideas for you.
And I'll leave this one open for all of you. We often see chapters planning events and focusing on events, and everybody has to be there, and it's mandatory, or we need 100% attendance. Is it necessary for all chapter members to, let me back that up. Is it necessary for all events to meet the needs of all chapter members? Is it possible to do something like a resume workshop, but only focus that on your younger members instead of asking the seniors, who may have done this a time or two, to be there as well? What are your thoughts?
I can start. I would say it's good to have attendance at events, but not every event is going to serve every brother. Our three pillars are service, brotherhood, and profession. And maybe there are certain members who really prefer events from one pillar over the next. And that doesn't mean they shouldn't attend them, but given if they had to pick and choose, they might pick something they prefer. As far as events that may have, like you said, a resume workshop that may come around again, we could try to put a spin on an event. So maybe an older brother pairs up with a younger brother to help them with their resume, instead of it just being a sort of lecture type of event. Just make it a little more engaging, and allow those brothers who maybe might not directly benefit from the event to also feel like they're included and feel like they can help as well.
And that's a great way for getting alumni involved. Because there's a lot of events that, especially when we're talking about professional development, students teaching students isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the experience is limited, right? And so being able to call on alumni, whether like if you know them personally or not, you can ask alumni, hey, we want to do this thing. We want this kind of information. Can you kind of help us out with that? And it's a great way to get especially local alumni involved. And I know it's sometimes difficult to get alumni to come to these events. And my recommendation with that is make sure you plan it ahead of time, because a lot of alumni already have plans, right? Or they have kids or what have you, or they have their Tuesday trivia nights. And so if you can give them at least a month in advance, or at least a few weeks, at a minimum, then you're more likely to have alumni show up, especially if you contact them one-on-one, whether call, text, whatever. Then you're more likely to get alumni engaged.
Yeah, so in terms of getting everyone at one event, definitely not a requirement. It's nice to have more brothers, obviously, at events, but sometimes it's hard because of like time conflicts and all of those things, or they just might not be interested in a certain event. But one thing you can kind of look at is, oh, Brotherhood tends to skew higher on event turnout compared to like service and PD usually. So why not tack on a Brotherhood event onto like a service or PD event? Like, so you do the service or a PD, and then you go straight into the Brotherhood event, this kind of thing. So that's a potential direction to go to kind of like increase turnout at ones that might not have as high a turnout, but it's not something, it's hard to push people to go to mandatory things. People don't like to be told what to do, of course. So incentives are always definitely the best route.
Lindsay, your point segues nicely into my next question about how to get alumni involved in events. What are some best practices for either hosting joint events or having alumni volunteer with the chapter? And I will preface that question by saying, when I was an undergrad, I didn't get it either. I was like, oh, it's in 2 weeks. We told them. Okay, now that I'm out here in the world, largely pretending to be a grown-up, it's hard. You have a lot more things pulling you in different directions, whether that's work or family or volunteer stuff. It adds on. And so what are some things that undergraduates and alumni should do to interact successfully, whether from a joint event capacity or as a volunteer?
So I think from a joint event capacity, putting the onus on the chapter for planning and ultimately coordinating everything is going to be the way to go, because students, y'all are going to be more invested in your chapter events than alumni are going to be. If an alumni isn't actively attending meetings every week, which they shouldn't be, for the record. If they are, you have a separate problem. But the chapter members, y'all are more vested or invested in your events than alumni are going to be regardless. And so if a student member is coordinating it and is the point of contact for an alumni, then the alumni has a very specific thing to deal with. And it's subject matter or expert, whatever. So just having it very specific of what the alumni is doing, and having it be more coordinating instead of planning.
Communication is also important, obviously, because what's that called? What am I trying to say? But yeah, you want to communicate with your alumni about the events well in advance. I think Lindsay mentioned that, but you also want to continue to communicate with them throughout the entire planning process. Like, oh, kind of from the start, kind of gauge, oh, what kind of events your alumni would be interested in. It's like, what are their interests? Because you, depending on the chapter, you either have a huge range of like how old alumni are from like different generations potentially, to like a younger chapter where it's just like, oh, recent grads. So you really kind of got to take into account which ones are going to show up, and then kind of maybe send out a survey, see, oh, what are you guys' interests? But communication back and forth is going to be very important to get them to turn out. Like if you're just throwing an event at them saying, oh, we have an event, like kind of like a blast text into like a alumni group chat or something saying, oh, we have an event coming up. It's this day. It's not going to get a lot of like traction as opposed to if you have members like reaching out to alumni, like who are actively involved with them to like continue the relationship.
On top of that too, asking alumni what they'd be interested in. Because just like student members, just like chapters, right? I remember planning events and thinking, oh, video game night, yeah, alumni will want to come to that. Not all of them will. I would, because I love video games, but some just watch football, right? And it also highly depends, I think, on what your school culture is or was, and what kind of environment your university is, and also just the local culture in general. Because the alumni that are going to come to your events are the ones that live in the area. It's going to be very rare that you're going to get someone that lives, over an hour away to come to something, unless they're in town for something else. Yeah.
Anything else to add on that?
There's a Top Golf near your area. A lot of alumni love to play golf, so it's a good place to hang
That's
out.
accurate. Some people in the chat, thank you, Bradford, knowing if your area has an alumni association. If you're not sure, you can always reach out to central office. They have lots of information. And actually, that kind of segues into if you have no idea how to reach local alumni, if you only have your chapter alumni contact information, you can reach out to central office and give zip codes, right? Of this is the zip code of the university. Can you send a list of alumni in the area? And they will provide you a list of contact information for who we have. That is highly dependent on alumni updating their information, but it can at least broaden who you've got available to you. I'm also digging Leonardo. D&D night. Also a niche crowd, but fairly broad, I think, in the fraternity. And can be done virtually.
Also a plus.
Also a plus. I'm sure you can get an alumni to DM something.
Absolutely. So I know that some of my favorite memories as an undergraduate were often things that didn't end up going well, or what we did on the fly on the elusive snow day in northern Pennsylvania. Share some examples of your favorite events, what made them good and what made them memorable?
I don't want to lead this one off.
I guess I can, since I have the most recent experience. As a student, Emily, like you said, yeah, a lot of the best events are just, when we're just flying by the seat of our pants and just going with the flow. So I would say the best, not even like full chapter events, just maybe like 5, 10, 15 brothers. It's just like spending afternoons like hang out with your brothers, like playing spike ball or volleyball, or like we have like a little like beach area by the lake, so maybe everybody going there on a Saturday, like going on the lake, getting dinner after, kind of just spending time in a less rigid environment than chapter. But then of course there are like events that can be really fun, to the point where, in my experience, certain chapter meetings have been the most memorable, because yes, we have an agenda, but you're getting to spend a couple hours on a weeknight with 80 of your best friends. And so I think it's really just how you view your chapter's culture. But like for me, the events just where I'm like laughing and having a great time with my brothers are always probably going to be my favorite memories.
I think my chapter used to do, I think they probably still do, a highway cleanup, and which is always very boring, and especially if it was winter, it was cold, it was miserable. Half the time it was raining when we did it, but every time we went, there were always like 20 of us, and we just start at one end of the highway and pick up trash all the way down, and where we ended, the highway we had adopted, it ended at a Wendy's. So we took over the Wendy's afterwards and just pigged out on fries and frosties and all that stuff. So it was
So you
always like,
washed your hands and gave awards for the grossest thing you found or something like that.
yeah, we stopped doing that when it got really gross. But it was always a nice way to end it, and kind of going off what Paige said is doing the official stuff, but then having the time afterwards where you kind of decompress with everybody.
I don't have a specific favorite event or memory, but again, it's always a time spent with my brothers. Usually it's like, again, doing something, or just like kind of a spontaneous thing that happens more than anything. Um, yeah, but like the most memorable ones are usually when something stupid happens, because those things you remember the most. Um, there probably, I don't know. One was when we were making ramen noodles, and then the liquid that we used to boil the ramen noodles did not happen to be water, and it caught on fire. We were camping, so it was like not a big deal, but we were just thinking, huh, why is this on fire? Just kind of put it out, didn't think anything about it, but that was very memorable. It was not water, so
Now I'm
yeah.
curious. I don't want to ask what it was. Uh,
We're gonna assume it was flammable chicken broth. Thank
There
you.
we go.
Flammable
Yeah.
chicken broth. But
That
definitely the stupid stuff. That's the things you remember the most.
yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up the question portion, I think I'd ask you guys, kind of going along with the memory piece, what was the best planned event that your chapter did? Not something that was spontaneous, um, something that you really felt contributed to what you were doing.
I guess I can go first. I won't say which event specifically, but the ones that I feel are like usually the best planned are the ones that have a good mix of like spontaneity along with organization. So it's like planned well enough where it has a structure, but it's still like fluid, where it's not like this, like a schedule this by this, but it's like other things can happen during the event, but it still follows a nice flow, if that makes sense. So a good combo of spontaneity and structure, TLDR.
I gotta think 10 years ago. Holy cow.
It could be a current event. Yeah, it could be something that you've experienced as an alumni as well. You don't have to condense it into just those times spent as an undergraduate.
Yeah, I will say, because most of my recent experience as a volunteer or as an alumni has been regional conferences. And I know, especially post-pandemic, we're still kind of ramping those back up, back to the quality we had. But regional conferences have been one of my favorites to be involved in general. And it's fun to see how chapters plan those differently between regions. And they always follow the same kind of format, but the flavor that every region brings to their own conference is always very interesting to see. And what kind of makes those great is specifically seeing the cultures of the university. and being able to see other university campuses, right? And kind of experience what that chapter sees every day. That's always fun.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Lambda Gamma held the Southeast Regional Conference in February, and I was kind of the person running point on everything, making the decisions for food and venues and scheduling and everything. And to see it from the back end and then watch 100 people come to our campus and have an exhausting but really exciting weekend was honestly, that's probably going to be like, although it's like the most planned event I've attended, it's probably one of the best, because I think for a lot of my brothers, they had never interacted with brothers from any other chapter. And so now it's like, oh, like these people are really awesome. And like, we stay in contact with them and stuff. And so I think regional conferences are just a really fun thing to go to. And so that's probably a good one for me.
Adding on to that too, from an alumni perspective, because regional conferences are also really great for inviting alumni back to stuff, again, especially the local alumni, because it's the opportunity to invite alumni back to see, one, how the chapter's grown, right? Or one, to see, or two, how to see, what the chapters in the region are like if they're not originally from the region, but also to share their professional experience or their chapter experience, even if they are from a different chapter, with that region. And kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with like the unprogrammed events, the stuff, the fun things after the official events, right, where you just kind of decompress and hang out with your brothers. It's regional conferences also gives you the opportunity to invite those alumni to hang out and just get their stories, and kind of see how different regions operate over the years, sort of deal.
Oh, speaking on regional conferences, something I always tell the host in our area is to kind of throw your own chapter's flair into it, make it your own, like basically make it your baby. Don't follow like a standard format or anything. It's like, what does your chapter do well that you can throw in there? Or like, what does your chapter love doing that you can turn into like one of those like afternoon or evening activities? Yeah.
As someone who worked on a university campus for about 10 years, this is also my place to tell all of you, you pay a student activities fee whether you want to or not. So please check out those university events. You don't always have to spend chapter funds or spend a lot of time planning an event that may be happening on your campus. So go. If it's comedian, go. If it's funny, you laugh. If it's terrible, you have a story. If there's a concert, go out there and utilize that opportunity to spend time together, but also it can often become a recruitment activity if people see you out and about on campus together. Before we ask for questions from the rest of the room, Paige, as someone who's recently participated in planning a regional event, and Vincent, as someone who's currently planning one, every region in the spring is having a regional conference. Two of them, actually 4 of them are joint, 2 and 2, but all regions are represented next semester. Why should people go? Where can they find that information out? And if their chapter happens to be hosting, what are some things they should consider?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Everybody has the opportunity to go to a regional conference next semester. Why should they go?
Oh, it's really fun. They're amazing. I don't know how else to better describe it. It's just a great time to like meet new people who you probably would never meet otherwise. Also a good day to decompress. Depending on the location, there's activities that are available. You can check out the city that it's in. Check out the university. Some schools, depending on the location, are also really nice. That information, usually RDs will send out a blast email to everyone. All chapter officers will have that information. The host chapter also, we encourage them to like kind of relay all the information out as well. So there's a lot of different platforms that are kind of out there. Some have Facebook events. It's on Discord usually. It'll be posted on Discord.
We also have a very handy dandy link in the chat to thetatau.org/events. Woo! This is a newer edition from my understanding. So you can see all of the dates and all of the locations for all of the conferences. So feel free to travel to any of them if you feel like it. Road trips are fun.
Yes, they are. So that's the end of our formal questions for our panelists. Are there any questions from the group?
Just a quick ad based on what David Parker said in the chat. Are there any national events planned for this summer? In fact, there are. We are bringing back Leadership Academy for the first time in several years. So this will be a weekend where students can finally have an event for them for their own like personal and professional growth. I think it'll be at the University of Pittsburgh, I think in July. So I guess be on the lookout for information about that, because from what I've heard, it's a really fun weekend, and you know, Theta Tau brothers like to have fun. So
for both of those, the regional conferences and the Leadership Academy, as far as national events go, they're highly encouraged just because you get to meet so many new people. And one, professional side, you're networking. Brotherhood side, you're meeting new people. You're meeting other brothers, which is always fun. And then service, sometimes we do service events at those.
Oh, and on the more technical side of why you should go to regional conference, if your chapter is queued to be hosting one in the near future, it's a good way to see how they're run, so you don't go in blind, especially since we've had like that big gap of like 2 years where there were no in-person regional conferences. A lot more people have not been to one than that have, so it's a great way to kind of see how one is run and how to host one potentially.
Absolutely. Other questions from the group? Excellent point from Bradford. Check in with your job to see if you get PTO benefits if you're allowed to recruit for National Convention and Leadership Academy.
That may also apply for internships.
Agreed.
Since
I
most of
have
you are
a
students.
question for the group. My name's
Go ahead.
Alicia. Thank you. My name's Alicia. I'm region of SAC Chapter. And one of the things that I think my chapter struggles with like event planning is all of the work falling on one person. And we have committees, and we've been trying in the last year to get our chairs to use their committees more and more. We've instituted committee meetings into our chapters. And I see it making a difference, but I still think that there's like a hesitation to delegate as a chair. And I think there's a hesitation from the committees to really engage. Do you guys have any suggestion on how to make those things happen?
Put people on the committee that care about it. Not to be like super blunt, but because I see that a lot where chapters who they make a committee, right? And they say, oh, you haven't been on this committee before, and just assign people to committees. And without having any input from the person of, I'm interested in this, I have ideas for this, I want to do this. And so that's my first recommendation, is identify the people that care about it and have them kind of in charge, or not necessarily in charge, but on the committee. But also, at least from what I remember as a student, is finding time to work on stuff was very difficult. And so a lot of the times it would fall to one person because it was just easier to do the work yourself when you could, instead of finding the time with the other committee members. And so that's something to take into consideration is one, making sure everyone's on the same page of what committee meetings are supposed to be. Are they working meetings, or is it planning? Like what are they? But also identifying and making sure that the people on the committee are able to meet regularly. And without like labs or classes or whatever getting in the way. Yeah.
One thing that my chapter has found helpful is in our minutes for every chapter meeting, we have set aside between 5 and 15 minutes for committee meetings. It gets everybody in the same place at once. Granted, you're not going to plan an entire event in 15 minutes, but you can at least maybe pick a date or kind of get ideas going when your entire committee is there. Another thing that might be important is just explaining the importance of being on a committee and the role that your committee serves for like either the chapter or for your campus community, because I think some people just, they're part of the bystander effect. They're like, oh, the committee head will take care of it. But if they really understand like, oh, we're community service this semester, we're going to help out like a local women's shelter. They really need to understand what their work is going into. And then I think they'd be far more likely to volunteer or be delegated some tasks and participate more.
I'll add to that. Make sure your committee chairs are really informed about what they're expected to do. And if you have the opportunity and you have a meeting with all of your committee chairs, maybe incentivize and praise. If you know that there's a committee chair who's doing really good work with their committee, people are engaged, recognize them. Even just pointing that out and recognizing the fact that they're doing good work means a lot to people. And that's a good example that the other committees can follow. And I also think some of it is time. The more time passes where you have committees working effectively to plan things, that's going to become the pattern versus this is something that we just started and maybe we don't see it being as effective as we want it to be yet.
Kind of building on that too, setting expectations, right, in general is great. Set expectations with all the committees and the chapter, and then hold people accountable to that, right? And so if they need to do 3 events in a semester, then have milestones for, okay, one should be planned by this time, not necessarily executed, but planned, and have those kind of milestones throughout and have someone that is checking up on that to make sure it's happening.
We have a question about event ideas to get brothers to know the PNMs better. Recommendations from our panelists?
Should invite them to your regular events. That's a great way to get to know them.
Step 1.
Yeah. And also just like reach out to talk to them. It doesn't have to be like a one-sided they get to know you thing. It should be a you get to know them thing more so, because you want them in the org. So hang out.
I'm gonna speak to this because I've been working on new member education stuff for ever at this point. One of the things I know we've seen chapters kind of struggling with is this question specifically, because a lot of the guidance we've kind of put out has been confusing for some chapters, and it's felt like chapters can't really meet with PNMs for health and safety concerns, or for being concerned it's going to cause health and safety issues. And so my advice is you can hang out with people. That is perfectly acceptable, right? Hang out in groups. It's when it's one-on-one, it starts to get dicey from a health and safety perspective, but it's perfectly acceptable for a group of brothers to hang out with a group of PNMs, get to know each other, right, in a group setting. It's just like when you were in high school and your parents wouldn't let you date, right? You had to do group dates. you had to go do movies with a group of people instead of one person. It's a very similar idea. And so you just have those conversations while hanging out, go see movies, go bowling, go do those things that you would do with your brothers. And it's the same as every day.
One really easy way to do that is kind of just add consistency to like your chapter schedule. So for my chapter, it's like from 7 to 10 every Monday and Wednesday. We have a certain, like the same exact room reserved. And so it's for our study hours, but it really just turns into people like watching shows, watching movies, listening to music, and it's brothers and P&Ms kind of just hanging out together until God knows what hour of the morning. And so it's really just like a low-key environment for everybody to engage with one another, and it really provides like a more genuine connection from P&M to brother than it would be during any type of like forced event or planned event.
Absolutely. And how do you keep people encouraged if an event that was supposed to be dynamic maybe doesn't land as much? How do you keep them encouraged and have them leaning in to doing that again?
Retrospectives. Those are and for if you haven't heard of that term, I apologize, you will when you graduate. So retrospectives, I found if an event didn't quite land right and it wasn't as great as people had hoped, pulling everyone together after the fact, after the events happened, after everyone's kind of like let it sit in their brain of why did this not work, right? Get everyone together and go through what did work, what didn't, why did it not work, and then what can we do in the future to make it better. And it helps you identify you know, was there a lack of communication? Was there, you know, did someone drop the ball on something? And as long as you make sure, you know, you're not blaming anybody, because that will kill any sort of progress. But just making sure that you can identify what the issues were without blaming anybody, and then come up with the solution together. I know, at least from my experience, the most enjoyable and encouraging thing that I have had, especially as a volunteer now, is going and doing these things from a national perspective, recognizing what's not working, and then problem solving with the other volunteers of, okay, how can we do this better?
I would add that you should be doing that even after an event goes well. You know, just it doesn't have to be extensive, but a quick debrief that night, shortly after, like what went well, what could we have done better, what should we consider adding or subtracting for next time.
I think also recognizing that just because an event wasn't dynamic does not mean that it wasn't successful. I think that just, you know, it's easy to get caught up on, oh, that wasn't really fun, but you may have accomplished those objectives that you set out to meet. And so recognizing that if you kind of have that same end goal in mind the next time, but just maybe changing a few things, and again, like reevaluating, getting feedback from participants, and maybe even an outside perspective can kind of just help you guys figure out what went wrong.
And also adding, thank you, Leon. When you do these, like when you're figuring out how to make things better, order pizza. It's fun. It just adds to the experience.
Snacks generally improve an event.
Yeah.
Generally speaking. Yeah. Any other questions from our attendees?
I had a question here. I'm Stephen Chang. I'm from the Zeta Gamma chapter. I'm currently the Marshal, and at our chapter, the Marshal is heavily involved in new member education and also P&M integration with the Brotherhood. So First, it's really great to hear that um, that it's encouraged to have our events be open to PNMs. That's what we've had in the past, and it's been really good. I wanted to try to improve a couple of our events. I think currently a lot of our events fall on like a Thursday, Friday night, or like any day, time Saturday, and that's ultimately like when most people are available. I wanted to try to have more events on like during the weekdays or during the day and not just during the night. Um, I was already thinking about having like more like study session type dates. So it's great to hear from Miss Paige that those ideas have worked well in other chapters. I just wanted to see if there's any other ideas that you guys had for maybe like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday during the day type event, like going to lunch or anything like that.
Good to see you, Stephen. I'll kind of start that off. So what I would recommend is just having just consistent dates, right? Consistent times, whatever, of people sitting in the library or people taking over sections of the food court, what have you, of, hey, we're studying. It's going to be either a general engineering study session or the electrical engineers have a test coming up. And so we're going to all take this spot, right? And we're going to study. You don't have to be the same year, right? But electrical engineering is studying at this time. And then again, snacks make everything better.
I would say it is kind of hard to plan for earlier in the week, especially when that's when a lot of student schedules are a little more like academic heavy. But you could just consistently do like, hey, like, like next Tuesday, let's all go and like go to like family dinner. So if they have like their bigs already, maybe that branch of the family tree like just like goes and does something. Because again, it doesn't have to be the whole class of PNMs doing something. It can just be a few of them. Or you could be like, hey, like, I'm gonna go sit at this coffee shop. If you guys want to like drop in, maybe if your budget allows it, like you guys can like grab a cup of coffee on the chapter and like let's just chat about like your classes, your personal life, your PNM experience, just like bring humanity back to the whole like pledging experience. That can be done any day of the week, and none of this stuff has to be too heavily planned because I'm sure as you've heard, like some of the least planned things are the best things. So just making yourself available, other brothers making themselves available, and just giving them a time and a day, somebody's bound to show up.
And also, if you have like sports oriented people in your chapter, I know a lot of intramurals occur during the weekdays, during the evenings. So if you can get like a group of people who are like who want to like play like one of those IM sports, and like brothers can also come out to support them at those events, that could be like your weekday event as well.
I am being intramural. Question.
Yes, intramural.
Okay.
Intramural sports.
Thank you. I'm not good with acronyms. I am not David with, the government acronyms. I am calling him out. Sorry.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, just
consistency
any
is really
other-
key. It's football season and people tend to gather around like Monday Night Football or Super Bowl Sunday. Theta Ta Tuesdays. Every day, every Tuesday from like 11 to 1, we're going to be here studying, eating lunch, whatever, or we're going to be at this location in the evening from 7 to 9 or whatever. Just be consistent and offer people things, and again, snacks, encourage people to bring their lunch, whatever you can do. And I think the consistency is the most important part of it. It's less about what the event is about, and people know that there's always going to be that thing they can go to. The same thing as like chapter meets here. We're going to do this event this time across the board.
I will say Theta Ta Tuesday or Theta Ta Thursday is very popular in a lot of chapters. Just for the alliteration.
Yeah. And maybe it's a game night or maybe it's just a hangout, but just something that's kind of consistent and low key and allows people to just gather without quote unquote having to be
there. Yeah, that sounds really great. I remember seeing another chapter did Theta Taco Tuesdays, and I really wanted to implement that into our semester
I dig it. It sounds delicious.
That sounds amazing. All right, if there are other questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. At this time, I will turn it over to Executive Director Jim Gaffney for some national announcements and other points. Jim?
Everybody, so in the chat, I'm dropping, theoretically, dropping a post-event survey. Fill it out before you leave. Talking earlier about planning good events. We can't do that if we don't know how well our events have done. That applies to the national fraternity too. So fill that out when you get a second. It's 3 questions, super easy. We have another program coming up in January. Those of you who attended convention will remember Sharon Kennedy Amoroso. She did our etiquette luncheon. She's going to come back and do a webinar on essential business etiquette to help you get from the interview to the boardroom. So if you go to thetatau.org/events, you can register for the program there. You can also go to our Instagram account and go to the link in our bio. We're really excited for that program. Her program was a hit at convention, and we think this is going to be great as well. I really appreciate everybody being here this evening. And so I'll toss it back to Emily to wrap up.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Jim mentioned the events page. Keep an eye on that. We have a number of things being planned for the spring for you, including some alumni panels from the perspectives of different types of engineers and some other things to help your chapter live its best life. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate your time. Have a good night. Those of you that are still doing the finals projects thing, good luck. It's almost over. Soon you get a break, and ideally there might be pie involved in that break. So have a good one. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.